Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the HZSound Heart Mirror. This is an IM that I actually first heard about from people in the YouTube comments telling me that this is an IM I should review, and that's, for me, kind of always a good sign. That's how I like to hear about IMs first. And what the Heart Mirror is, and maybe why people thought it would be especially interesting to me, is that it apparently, according to folks, would cater to my sound preferences. And if you've watched my channel, you probably have a sense for what that is, but those are spoilers. We'll talk about the sound in a little bit. But what this thing is, it's a relatively budget IM. It costs around 60 bucks on Amazon, but I have actually seen it a little bit cheaper some other places. And for 60 bucks, what you get is a single dynamic driver earphone with a pretty nice build quality, as we'll see. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But then you also get a sound signature that is, I'll go ahead and say it, like this is relatively kind of a bright neutral sound signature, which is not super common in the budget space. So that's kind of the spoiler of why people thought I might especially like this. And it seems that there's a bit of kind of a cult following for the HZSound Heart Mirror. So I was personally very interested to check this thing out. So I went ahead and bought it, spent a couple of weeks listening to it and comparing it with some other IMs in this price range. And now I'm ready to let you know what I think. Like my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're here now, watching now live, what's up? How's it going? If you've got any questions about the Heart Mirror that I don't answer in the review, please feel free to drop those questions into the live chat box. And at the end of the review, we'll have a little back and forth conversation, and hopefully I can clear up any questions that someone might have about the Heart Mirror. Otherwise, if you're watching now, if you're watching the VOD, that's fine. Just subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell so that YouTube lets you know next time I'm live. And for now, let's go ahead and dive into the HZSound Heart Mirror. Actually, let me turn this light off real quick. Get rid of that ugly bar. But yeah, this is the IM, and like I typically do, I'll just do a quick overview of what comes inside the packaging. And for 50 bucks or 60 bucks that I paid for it, about what you expect, pretty nice little package. So you do get this little carry case, which is actually, I think, one of the more usable carry cases that a manufacturer can include. It's got a bit of a hard shell, but relatively soft, and honestly, like, it's a pocketable size, which is not always the case for these things. They do also include two different sets of ear tips, which I think is pretty cool. They give you a set of white tips and actually three different sets of tips. They give you a set of white tips, a set of black tips, and a set of foam tips. You can see that the ones I have on the Heart Mirror now are the black silicone tips. And the reason for that is that these things are actually have got like a nice grippiness to them, which isn't always the case, especially a lot of budget ear tips are a little bit, they're a little bit on the firm side, maybe soft and plasticky. Both of these are pretty good, but the black ones I went with because I like their extra grippiness. They actually look to me also a little bit like Sony's ear tips, if you've seen those before. And those are ear tips that I like quite a bit, as well do a number of other people. But yeah, also foam tips. Also inside the package, for some reason, a carabiner. I'm not sure what you're supposed to do with this. It doesn't even have any HZSound branding or anything on it, but there you go. You get a carabiner. You get a shirt clip, which I've never personally used. I just use these to make puppet shows or something like that. But then they also include this, which might not be obvious what this is. This is an extra set of filters. Because the HZSound Heart Mirror, if you pull it off up here, you can tell you've got these little filters stuck on the nozzles, which, you know, with some IMs, and some people have issues with that being sort of a common failure point for IMs. They just get clogged with disgusting ear gunk, which I try not to think about too much, but yes, our ears are pretty gross, and I guess it's nice that they include a spare set in there. But otherwise, I don't know. Let's just talk about the IM itself, which I guess I'll start with actually talking about the cable, which it comes with a pretty nice cable, if I'm perfectly honest. This is, again, a reminder, like a $50 to $60 earphone, and it comes with a cable that is better than a lot of cables I've seen on, honestly, like the 64 audio stuff. Like this is, but I don't know, maybe that's not saying a ton, but I will say this is a pretty solid little cable. You know, pretty basic 4-core braid. It Rode wraps quite well. Let's give it the old try here so you can take a look for yourself. It lies nice and flat, generally pretty well behaved. You might have noticed that it does have a bit of a tendency to be a little memory prone. You can kind of see it kind of curls itself up, but for the most part, honestly, really pretty happy with this cable for especially a $60 earphone. It's hard to complain too much. Down here, you get your pretty standard 3.5 millimeter connector, and it is on a right angle if you're into that. My personal preference is for straight jacks, but I'm pretty 50-50 on that. And then here you got your pretty small Y split with a really nicely integrated chin slider that is actually functional. It doesn't slide itself down, but it's also not overly hard to move up and down. I think, honestly, this might seem like a weird thing to say, but this is just about the perfect Y split. I don't know why this is such a complicated thing and why so many other manufacturers don't do this very well. That is a perfect Y split. Good job. But up here, you do have pretty standard 2-pin connectors. Pop that out, kind of looks, reminiscent of Moondrop style. And the connectors on the IMs are slightly recessed, but for the most part, not really much of a recession in there. But, it could be a risk for lateral motion causing the pins to bend or something like that. So if you get this IM, I would be careful about that. But it's a pretty common thing. And frankly, I've personally never had issues bending an IM 2-pin cable. And then you do have some preformed ear hooks, pretty lightly preformed, and generally pretty happy with this cable. That brings us to the earpieces themselves, which, as you can see, are kind of playing into that Heart Mirror name. These things are just very, let's see if we can even take a look at, let's see if we can get something in that mirror that is, oh, there, look at there. That's me. That's what I look like on a normal day. But yeah, very mirrored finish, and they are metal shells. Let's see if we can give it a little clink test. So very metal, not too heavy, but they do have a nice weight to them. They feel pretty nice. And I'll give them a little fit test just to demonstrate that I think these are actually pretty nice, small fitting IMs that I'm generally pretty happy with. So plug it into the head, zoom in so you can take a look. You can see it doesn't take up a ton of room in the concha bowl. And generally I found it to be relatively secure, not the most secure fitting IM because it's not like a super molded, like semi-custom design or anything like that, but it does nestle into my concha very, very nicely. The nozzles on these, and we'll punch back in here so you can take a look. The nozzles have, a decent length, not overly long, but just about the right length. And I found with these tips, generally just, a very nice fitting IM. So on the physical aspects here of the HZSound Heart Mirror, honestly, a lot of really good stuff. So again, for around 50 to 60 bucks, zero complaints, honestly. Like, really nice little carry case, nice selection of tips, and the unit itself is quite nice to wear. So that will bring us into talking about the sound here on the HZSound Heart Mirror. And like I typically do, I'll just start with a bit of a kind of an overview of the sound signature, which I already alluded to a little bit in the introduction. So a lot of earphones, especially in the budget price range, right? Under 100 bucks, almost everything out there is pretty much V-shaped, which means you got bass emphasis, you got treble emphasis, or maybe it's mid-range emphasis of some sort, but the mid-range it gets compromised in that equation. And that's true of really just a lot of earphones under 100 bucks. If you want like a neutral sound signature, there are some options, which I'll be comparing this thing to, but there's not a lot of options. And so I think it is always nice when an IM like the HZSound Heart Mirror goes for a more neutral sound signature. And I would describe this as a bright neutral sound signature. So fairly light on bass. I would not get the HZSound Heart Mirror if you are looking for a big bass cannon earphone, but the bass on here is not like, it's not super recessed and super flat sounding bass. It does have a decent little bounce to it. But I would say it is relatively light on bass. Mid-range tuning is actually pretty decent. It's got some upper mid-range gain, which you would expect to account for the fact that this thing is bypassing your concha. But really, where the tuning is kind of stand out here is in the treble. There is an elevated treble presence here on the Heart Mirror. So roughly how I would describe this, bright neutral, right? Mid-range focus-ish with maybe a little bit more focus on the treble. So what do I like about the sound here on the HZSound Heart Mirror? Well, like I said, it's nice to have in this space another anti-bass cannon. Again, the bass on here is actually pretty decent. Like, it's got a nice punchiness to it. It hits well, it's well controlled. It's not going to be smearing up the mid-range at all because of its bass levels. Like, it's just, I think the bass on this is actually pretty well done. And the upper mid-range tuning, I think, is actually also pretty well done. I think also with that treble emphasis, the imaging qualities here on the Heart Mirror are above average, which just means that like the separation between sounds and the sense that, you know, the guitars and the drums and the vocals and are all kind of coming from different sort of points in space. The Heart Mirror does a better job than average with that, which is somewhat common for a bright tuned IM, but I do think that, especially with that bass quality here, which again, not elevated bass, but the dynamic driver bass that is here has got enough body to give sort of an added sense of depth to the sound. So that's what I like about the sound here on the Heart Mirror. What maybe did I not like about the sound here on the Heart Mirror? And honestly, it's the treble. It's too much for me. And I know that I'm kind of a bit of a treble maker myself, a bit of a treble head. But frankly, I found this to be too much. It's a little bit shrill. The treble can at times be a little bit sharp. There's, you know, maybe a little bit too much sizzle, which is a vague way of describing the treble. But yeah, just listening to this thing, honestly, I found the treble to be a little bit fatiguing, and it caused me to want to listen to the Heart Mirror at volumes quieter than I might normally listen to, which, you know, I'm not an especially loud listener normally anyway. So the fact that this was kind of demanding me to turn down the volume on my player even further than normal, it's kind of a sign that the treble here is maybe not the best tuned. And if I look at the frequency response graph, like, I don't want to read too much into it, but it is a little bit sort of on the spiky side, and not so much on the smooth side. And that seems to be correlated with a treble presentation here that is just a little bit more fatiguing than it is necessarily revealing. Sibilance on the Heart Mirror, I would say, is not like especially bad, but I would say it's worse than average. And when we're talking about sibilance, a lot of the times that's really just baked into the recordings. Their, you know, vocals are going to have sort of this really sharp S sounds that are uncomfortable, and some earphones can kind of plow through it pretty well. Some earphones will let you hear the sibilance, and some of them will actually play it up a little bit. I find that the Heart Mirror is sort of on that edge of playing up the sibilance a little bit. And so I think that roughly describes, you know, what I think about the sound here on the Heart Mirror. I'm not sure if it's worth ranking or anything, but the obvious comparison here with the Heart Mirror is this, which, if you're not familiar with what this earphone is, this is the Moondrop SSR. This is another kind of bright neutral earphone that came out about a year ago, actually. And it's also a budget priced earphone. This one actually costs around $40, so even cheaper than this. I think the dynamic driver in the Heart Mirror is larger. This is only a 6mm driver if you care about the size of your drivers. But otherwise, let's see, how do these things compare? I mean, I'll talk about how they compare physically. I'll say that the fit-wise, like in my ear, they're actually pretty similar. You can see that, you know, size-wise, they're not too far off, although the SSR does have that little notch in it that makes it feel a little bit smaller. But honestly, inside the ear, and this does have a little bit more body on it as well. But yeah, inside the ear, they feel, I'd say, equally comfortable. Maybe a little bit of extra security here from the Heart Mirror just because of that body and its, you know, ability to grip the inside of the concha. But otherwise, yeah, these are both really good fitting IMs. I think you could comfortably sleep in either of them. The cables, so I had a lot of good things to say about the cable here on the Heart Mirror. Honestly, there are not a lot of cables I would say are like actually hands down better than this cable, because it's a pretty solid cable. But the SSR does happen to have one of my favorite 2-pin cables out there. Just, you know, nice and thin, maybe not quite as nice looking, but it's a little bit better behaved. And maybe that's not coming across here. This one does have a little bit of memory, having been sat in storage for a while, but I generally prefer the cable here on the SSR. Let me give it the old rodeo wrap so you can see just how beautifully and wonderfully well behaved that cable is. But more to the point, let's talk about the sound and how these things compare. And there's a lot between them that's kind of similar, right? I said this does not have a lot of bass, but it does have a decently punchy bass, what is there. And I think that's also true here on the SSR. I do think that the bass on the SSR is better though. It's a little bit tighter, a little bit faster, and just kind of like a little less sloppy in the decay. Not that the Heart Mirror is especially sloppy in the decay or anything like that. Again, there's like no bleed or anything like that, but the SSR bass just really gives that sense of just really tight, fast, punchy bass that the Heart Mirror does an okay job of, but I think the SSR is kind of next level on. And then mid-range tuning, they're, you know, roughly similar. Again, they, you know, I think the SSR does have more upper mid-range emphasis, which can have the effect of bringing vocals maybe a little bit closer to you, or at least sort of like the main body of vocals. But the real big difference between these two IEMs is really going to come across in the treble presentation. Now, both of these I would describe as bright neutral sounds. The difference, however, and I don't want to overinterpret the frequency response graphs too much, but from what I can tell, based on that as my one point of data, and more from, you know, my listening experience, is that the treble here on the SSR, while it is, yes, forward and above the bass levels, I find the treble here honestly perfectly smooth. When, you know, I was talking about how this thing does with sibilance. Again, the SSR is not like the best with sibilance, but versus this, it's really no contest. The treble in here, and maybe this is, you know, like all of these things, this is really down to personal preference. When I listen to this sounds to me the way that some people describe the SSR, which is a little bit thin, overly shrill, and a little fatiguing in the treble. I don't have that with the SSR. I find this nice and smooth. You know, yes, it is a little bit on the thin side, but generally I'm, you know, for a $40 IM, I quite like the SSR still. The Heart Mirror, I think, is just kind of like a worse version of it. And that's my honest take. So I think that's about as much as I can say about the HZSound Heart Mirror. So I might as well go ahead and give it a score. And out of 5 stars, I think I'll give this thing a solid 3 stars. You know, there's a lot to like here. The physical aspects are honestly, you know, really no serious complaints for a $50 IM. No serious complaints if this was like a $100 IM, honestly. And then the sound signature, I like what they're doing. I like that there is another bright neutral option under $100. And for some people who listen to something like the Moondrop SSR, maybe it's a little bit dull and boring because, I don't know, you might actually appreciate the extra treble presence here on the Heart Mirror. But for me, it's too much. I find it a little bit fatiguing. And because of that, yeah, I'd say 3 stars. That said, if you're interested in checking out the HZSound Heart Mirror, of course, I got a link in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you found this video helpful, please do hit the like button. Helps me out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ding the YouTube bell. And then I'll catch you on the next super review. And if you're here live now, stick around. Let's have a little chat. All right, let me catch up with live chat as best as possible. And if anyone has any questions about the Heart Mirror, the SSR, or any other comparisons that I didn't make, because I just focused here on the SSR, that was where I spent my time, especially over the past week, with the very deliberate comparisons. But there are other IMs in this price range that you might be interested in comparing it to. So if you have any of those questions, feel free to drop them in the chat right now. Early folks, Shenzai, nice to see you there. Always good to talk to you. Umar saying good morning, people. Good morning there. It is almost 5 p.m. here in California. David K saying, I was hopeful when I saw the frequency response, but not so hopeful anymore. The SSR is still the best budget bright IM. Any others? So, in my opinion, yes. If you want a sub $100 IM that is kind of a bright neutral sound signature, the SSR is my pick. I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, there is, you know, something like the Tin Hi-Fi T2. I think also a really good option. And maybe the mid-range tuning on the T2 might actually be a little bit tamer, a little bit more palatable for some people. And the bass levels kind of relative to the mid-range are also a little bit more present. So for some people, I think the T2, the original T2, which came out, yeah, like 4 years ago at this point, that's still honestly a pretty decent contender. But for my money, I'll pick the SSR pretty much any day. Cheebs, hello, how's it going? Susie Baka, howdy, nice to see you there as well. Recode, what's up? All right, so Shenzai, you predicted a 3-star review. Recode, you predicted a 4-star. Congratulations to Shenzai. And Cheebs saying those tips look like Sony hybrid tips. Yeah, they definitely do. And I'll punch in on these again so you can take a look. They've got, you know, the colored insides. In fact, they've got a different color on the larges and a different color on the smalls, just like the Sony hybrid tips. I'm guessing that whoever makes these probably sells them somewhere as a clone, but it's not a bad pack in. They're a little bit on the thin side maybe, but the silicone quality is good for gripping the inside of the ear, and I didn't have any issue with the silicone like collapsing or anything like that, which you could have a problem with a really thin walled ear tip, such as the Sennheiser stuff. Muhammad Ali saying those IMs need a lot of power, and that I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is the thing I wanted to talk about here, I guess, with both of these IMs, right? I had heard the meme that the Heart Mirror needs a lot of power. And as with all things, and a lot of power is a relative term, right? Obviously, you don't need to hook these things up to high gain on a shit Jotunheim amplifier. Like, you don't need that kind of power to drive these, right? And that's not how I interpreted it, how most people were describing these things require a lot of power. But if I'm perfectly honest, I can't really think of any sense in which I would describe the Heart Mirror as requiring a lot of power. The SSR, this is an IM that, amongst all the IMs I have, is on the lower sensitivity side, which just means if I hook this thing up to your average smartphone, I'll probably be listening to it at like, 50, 60, maybe 70% volume for my listening levels. If you're a loud listener, I can imagine running into the high end of your volume range on a smartphone. So you could say that the SSR is hard to drive, but I wouldn't say it's hard to drive in the sense that like an Apple dongle is not enough. An Apple dongle is perfectly fine for me. The Heart Mirror is much more sensitive than the SSR. I was comparing these things back and forth, listening to the SSR, unplugging it, plugging in the Heart Mirror, and every time the Heart Mirror was the louder of the two IMs. So the meme that the Heart Mirror requires a lot of power, I honestly just don't get it. Just to sort of like rule out any magic, I suppose, from running these things on high power sources. I did run these things off of my Shit Valley 2 just before the review and compared it to my little digital audio player, which is the primary way I listen to these IMs. And it didn't change the fact that, it didn't change the sound. I don't know what people expect. I would like to dispel at this moment the meme that the Heart Mirror requires a lot of power, that it needs special amping. That just was not my experience. But thanks for bringing that up. Cheeb's asking Heart Mirror versus Azul. Not really much comparison. Sissy Baka, brighter than SSR, and yeah. So in case that wasn't clear in my description, my comparison of these two, I think the treble on the Heart Mirror this is where it's like, is it brighter? I don't know. It definitely, the treble sounds more fatiguing. And if you look at it on a frequency response graph, the treble between these two IMs is somewhat in line, honestly. It's just more that the treble on the Heart Mirror is spiky, which means it kind of like comes up and then goes back down. It comes back up and comes back down. And I don't know for a fact that spikiness is what contributes to the fatigue nature of the Heart Mirror, but based on the available data, that's what I'd have to attribute it to. The similar treble levels that you have on the SSR, maybe they're also balanced out a little bit more by that increased upper mid-range presence that the SSR does have. But also just the treble, it doesn't have like this spikiness to it. The treble here is just kind of smooth, and it's not necessarily the ideal tuning for treble. I'll be the first to say that. Like, a little bit of EQ, in my opinion, can improve the treble tuning here on the SSR, but I really just don't have issues with this being fatiguing, whereas here on the Heart Mirror, I did. Hopefully that clarifies. Scott Pleasure saying those cables look uncomfortably thick. Honestly, I don't think this cable is especially thick. What can if you've used the SSR, this is a fairly thin cable. So just for comparison, there you go. I think, I don't know, I think the weight on this is medium. It's not an overly thin cable, but I don't think it's an overly thick cable either. But also Scott Pledger, good to see you again. Rob Hawk, good to see you there again as always. And Ishman Ryan asking SSR versus SSP versus Blon 05S. I'll say I have not spent a lot of time with the Blon 05S, so I'm not going to be able to make much of a valid comparison between those at this point. For the SSR versus the SSP, I definitely fall on the side of I prefer the SSR. I have a review of the SSP where I did a lot of comparison between the SSR and the SSP. I would refer you to that because I haven't listened to them head to head in a while. So that review that I did, I don't know, like 9 months ago is probably going to be the best source of what I think of these two IMs. Yeah, generally I found that the SSP does give you a little bit more bass, but it came at the expense of sort of the technicalities of the SSR. And for me, that was more important. The technicalities were more important than having a little bit of extra bass. Recode saying T2 Plus, actually a better alternative if you want treble, I guess. So the T2 Plus is a very good IM still. I reviewed that one about a year ago as well. And I remember having some issues with sibilance with that particular IM. Interestingly, I did some ear tip swapping not too long ago, and I think it was the Asla Sedna ear tips I landed on. For some reason, they just actually cleared up the sibilance for me. So the T2 Plus is like, that's a really solid pick for me, and I no longer have that caveat that it might be sibilant. I mean, it still might be sibilant to your ears, but it really is kind of coupling dependent to your specific ears, and at least for myself, I found a solution. Scott Pledger with the super chat. Nice, thank you, appreciate that. Saying good to see you too. Sorry it's been a while. Have a drink on me. Appreciate that. Yeah, how you doing? How are things? I know last time we were talking, you were very interested in comparing the Sony XM4s with, was it the Bang & Olufsen, the B&O True Wireless IMs, or was it another brand? I forget exactly. I'd be curious if you were able to satisfy that curiosity in your own, because I have not been able to get a hold of a pair myself and listen to them. Susie Baca saying, if it's too bright for S Super Review, although many people love Heart Mirror, preference is key. Yep, totally agree. And look, I want to say, you know, the thing I say a lot of the times, right? While I have said, for me, this is a 3-star IM, not a bad IM, but I'm not going to be the first one that I personally go to listen to. I know a lot of people are excited about the Heart Mirror, and I don't want to take anything away from those people, right? If you have the Heart Mirror, you love the way it sounds, ignore me entirely. A lot of the times I find that this is just sort of a thing with online communities. A lot of people go to reviews for validation, right? They're maybe not confident in their own personal opinions on things, and like they're happy about some things, but they still want to go to either other reviewers, or they want to go to frequency response graphs to kind of like validate their opinion. My honest opinion, and I don't know if this is me validating or invalidating, I don't know what I'm doing right here. My honest opinion is that you should try and just form your own opinions. And if you have an opinion that's different than what other people say, there's no problem with that. Look, I like the SSR more than a lot of people. I know there are a lot of people that like the SSR as much as I do, so I don't feel alone in that. But there's some people that just, like I said, the way that I describe this is how some people describe the SSR. But for me, I love the sound here on the SSR. And the fact that some other people, some other reviewers, and maybe some frequency response graphs don't look that flattering for the SSR doesn't really change the fact that this is honestly one of the earphones that I've spent the most time listening to over the past year, despite the fact that I've got plenty of more expensive stuff. I really like this one. This one, I'm probably not going to be going to outside of this review. But again, form your own opinion. Gabrielle Miranda saying, good morning, great review, thank you, thanks for watching. And Susie Baca is saying that the blonde BL03 is widely considered the best blonde. And yeah, that's actually, so I think you're responding to the person that asked me about the blonde 05. Part of the reason I didn't listen to the 05 very much is it just seemed, I mean, it's different than the 03, but it seemed worse than the blonde BL03, and it's more expensive. So I didn't spend a ton of time listening to the blonde 05, honestly. I do think that they did come out with, and you might have even referenced the S model. I never heard that one. Daytoy saying, good day, a bit late. Did I already take a look at the Heart Mirror? And yes, I did. Drum roll, please. My review of the Heart Mirror. I mean, you can go back and watch the justification, but the score for the Heart Mirror, 3 stars. It's not bad, but it's a bit hot in the treble for me. But Unlucky San, one of the folks that, you know, like I mentioned, this has got a bit of a cult following. Unlucky San saying, I have this IM and I really love the sound of it. So there you go. Take another opinion. Nanmin, nice to see you there. SSR for the win. I agree. And eat. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the rest of that. You say, I drive the Tin Hi-Fi P1 for my phone. I don't understand the need. You need a lot of power meme. Yeah, I played into that a little bit myself. I find that the P1 is definitely, I would say that's the hardest to drive IM that I have. So if I'm listening to that on something like my Sony Walkman, which I don't have sitting here, but if I'm listening to that on my Walkman, I find myself taking that to volume levels higher than any other IM that I listen to. And this is where, you know, it really gets into a bit of placebo effect probably, but like I like to have headroom in my source for whatever reason. Maybe it's again a perpetuating a bit of a meme or a myth that that sources, amplifiers sound better when they're not pushed to their maximum capacity. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here and make a hard argument for that, but that was kind of like my just intuition when I was listening to the P1 is that I did like to listen to that on a source with a knob, and that gets into a whole other level of placebo. But I think knobs make hard to drive sources or hard to drive things sound better. Yep. Do I think it seriously sounds better? No. Do I think it like makes me feel like it sounds better? Yeah. Rob Hawk asking, have I tried the Quarks? I have a little bit. That review will be coming up soon. But I wanted to get through some other reviews first. So I think my next review will probably be another DAP. I've got the Stellan Kern SE200 on loan. So I want to knock out that review. That'll probably be in the next couple of days. Ishmael, what would be my choices with wide soundstage at $20 to $35? Questions like this where it's like, I want the best soundstage. I think that it might be that like I just don't hear soundstage. It might be that my perception of soundstage doesn't seem to match everyone else's perception of soundstage. It might be that IMs just aren't really like that big in the staging that I just don't care. Like I think soundstage is not necessarily the differentiator that I would be considering when I'm looking at especially $25 to $30. In the $25 to $30 space, look for something that sounds good, doesn't have problems. Like that's kind of like the first order of business. And then find something that has the sound signature you want, right? Do you want something bassy? Do you want something neutral-ish? And how do you want it to fit? So, you know, $25 to $30, you don't have a ton of options, but what I would recommend is check out squig.link/list, or just go to squig.link and click the rankings button in the header. You can filter that list for price and then filter it down to 4 and 5 star reviews, and you'll see my favorite IMs in that price range. Again, like that list doesn't say like this one has bigger soundstage than the other, just because I don't really interpret the sound that way. Like that's just not a factor that I'm considering when I'm listening to them. But the score is, how much I enjoy it, and hopefully that's helpful. And Scott, you followed up on the B&W PI7. That's what you were looking at. You wound up getting them, and you really liked them for a pair of TWS. You tried the new Sonys, but they were too big for my ears, and I can definitely get that. The Sony XM4 is a pretty big unit. Shenzai, you're saying that Susi is pronounced Sus-E. Okay. I've probably pronounced it a million different ways, but we'll go with Sus-E. Retro Consoles Online, super. I want a sub $200 pair of IEM. Should I get the C Audio Yume, the 10P1, or the Legacy 4? Again, I would recommend go to squig.link, click the rankings button in the header, and use that tool to narrow down your choices. Actually broaden your choices, frankly, because between those three different IEMs, I'm not sure how you arrived at those three particular IEMs. I don't know what your preferences are in terms of sound signature. I don't know what you prioritize in terms of fit and stuff like that. So I would really recommend check out squig.link, look at the rankings link in the header, and filter by price. You can filter to $200. You can filter by score. And then take a look at the frequency responses. You can compare them and kind of get a sense for what they might sound like. And then I also have links to my reviews there, so you can kind of get, again, a further sense of what their relative strengths are. Because I know I have a friend that, Sean, he likes the Yume better than almost any other IEM he's heard. And if you really prioritize frequency response, the Yume is a really good pick. If you want something maybe a little bit more V-shaped sound signature, I think the Thea Audio Legacy 4 is a pretty good pick as well. But for my personal preferences in terms of sound, I would actually probably pick the P1 because the extended treble on it gives it just a little bit of a special sauce that a lot of IEMs in the sub $200 price range don't have. So yeah, but the Legacy 4 also, the other thing that's really going for it is its fit. Really excellent fit. I guess also I would say too, like under $200, there are more options to even look at too. So like my personal pick under $200 would be the Tanch Jimhanas, either the 2021 or the 2020. Yeah, those are pretty fantastic. And Non-Men, talking about audio reviews, always take with a pinch of salt. I agree. Everyone's taste is different. My friend was constantly recommending me the SSR, though, and I'm not really a treblet. So this is like a bigger discussion. But a lot of comments and like questions that I get in on YouTube asking me for recommendations, I think have this misunderstanding of audio, like that there's like this scale of good, better, best, and they want to know what is the best thing that I can get. And it's so contingent on a lot of things. What's your budget? What are your preferences? What do you value? Because there's like honestly no guarantee that my favorite IEM at, let's say, under $1,000 you'll like any better than the Blonde BL03, which cost around $30. And I'm totally serious. There's going to be a lot of people out there who will honestly, genuinely prefer the Blonde BL03 versus something like the Moondrop S8. And they're not wrong. There's no right or wrong answers in this. It really just comes down to personal preference. What do you value in sound? What do you value in build quality? What do you think is worth spending money on? So if you've got a budget of $1,000, the best IEM for you might be the $30 Blonde BL03. And I don't know what my advice here is that, first of all, when you're asking for advice, whether from me or from anyone else, just be a little bit more clear about what's your frame of reference and what are you looking for, right? If you have already heard the Blonde BL03 and you're saying like, I like it, but maybe it's a little bit muddy in the low end, and I'd like maybe something like that sound, but I'm willing to spend up to 200 bucks. Okay, from there I can kind of work on a recommendation. If you just say what's the best sounding IM for $1,000, like I don't know how to answer that question. Kind of similar to what's the best soundstage under 30 bucks. I don't know how to answer that question. I think it's the wrong question, which is a hard thing to say and maybe a hard thing to hear. But that's kind of the reality of a lot of the world in general. It's like, you know, just consider maybe outside of even audio, you might be asking the wrong question. Scott Pleasure saying, I'm a very tactile person and a good potentiometer is just so satisfying. I agree. So that's talking about the volume knobs. I have my amps over here, but I can't drag them into frame. But yeah, man, having a good volume knob, that's like the main reason why I'm interested in buying a more expensive amp. Not even like the main reason. It might be the only reason that I'm interested in buying a more expensive amp. I've got the Shit Valley. I've got the Drop THX AAA1. They're both like sub $200 amps, and they've got knobs. And they're pretty decent knobs, but they're not like the most optimal action knobs. I know if I spent more, I can get a better knob. And I'm kind of tempted to. Does it actually sound better? No. But it makes the experience of listening better in a way that kind of almost does make it sound better. And I'm not lying. Like, it's kind of the experience. Atomic Puppet, thanks for your live. I found out about the Moondrop Quarks. I got a pair and they will be here soon, fingers crossed. Yeah, look, the Quarks. I unboxed it about a week ago. $13. I'll say right now, I have not listened to it enough to give it a full review, but it's worth 13 bucks. You're not going to go wrong there. Oh, Scott, you've got an amp with a clicky pot? Which amp is that? I'm actually trying to wonder, would I prefer clicks or no clicks? And I guess it would really depend on the feel of the clicks, which is now getting just like next level picky, but that's like, I feel like that should just be, I don't know. I don't watch a lot of amplifier reviews, and manufacturers have asked me to review their amplifiers, and I've mostly turned them down because I'm just like, I don't really know what to say about an amplifier except for just spend 20 minutes talking about knob feel, which maybe would be worth it. I don't know if you'd watch that, but that's probably what I would focus on. S. Morales, what are my top 5 IMs? It's not really a thing I think about. Like, it depends on what the price range is. Like, if I were just to pick my top 5, the best 5 IMs I've heard, it might be like a boring list because they would be kind of expensive. And it wouldn't really tell you that much. I don't know. I am going to do, last year at the end of the year, I did my earphone of the year review, or just kind of like awards. And in that, I said these were my 5 favorite IMs that I had reviewed that year. That might be a good way to go back and get a sense for what are my 5 favorite IMs. This year is going to be another set of 5 IMs, and I have actually already been starting to think about what will be my 5 earphone of the year awards this year. And I've got some pretty good contenders, but we've also got a good, 4 months left. So we'll see. MJ's the best. Do you have any recommendations for a good bassy IM for $300 or less? You were looking at the Campfire Audio Honeydew, but reviews seem to be mixed. For $300 or less, it depends on how bassy you're talking. The IM under $300 that I would describe as bassy, that would be my favorite, would be something like, I think maybe 2 choices. Something like the Moondrop Blessing to Dusk, which is definitely bassy, but it's pretty thin in the mid bass, which might leave some bass heads wanting. So if you are sure that you actually want some mid bass and not just a lot of sub bass, I think the Tantrum Hana 2021 is a pretty good pick, and that's actually under 200 bucks. You could also look at something like the Sennheiser IE300. For me, I prefer the Blessing and the Tantrum over the Sennheiser, but the Sennheiser is definitely more of a bass head IM. So if you're looking for a bass head IM, the Sennheiser might be the trick. I haven't heard the Campfire Honeydew, but I also have just not really heard very good things about it. Sussy Baka saying, I think tomorrow I will get the Moondrop Blessing to Dusk and or the Sparks. Super hyped. Right on. There you go. Hopefully you like it. Marlo Soretta, do I plan to review the T-Force audio? No, I haven't actually heard of that one. Johnny Welk asking, did I ever have time to try the brown filters in the Evos? No, I haven't done that yet, but I am planning to do that within the next couple of days. I'll throw up the frequency response on squig.link so you can take a look and see what the brown filters do for the Evo. My expectation is it's going to be very similar to what they did for the ER2. The challenge, or like sort of like the mental math that I'm doing in my head, is like trying to decide if I want to listen to it like that. And the reason I'm saying it that way is that when I take the filters in and out of the Evo, there's a good chance I will destroy them. And I only have one more set of brown filters. So in order for me to listen to it, I have to put that one set into the IM. And if I don't like the way it sounds, if I go back to stock, which I'm kind of tempted to keep it stock anyway, there's a good chance I will destroy the brown filters that I have. Now I've got plenty of green filters, so I'm not too worried about destroying those, but I really don't want to destroy the spare brown filters that I've got. I could destroy one of them, right? And I only need to destroy one of them in order to measure the frequency response. I don't know. I got to think about this. Maybe I shouldn't think about it too much. I should just do it, and then if I destroy the filters, I eat the $30 for a new set of filters, which in the grand scheme of things is not too much, but it feels a little wasteful. Nodmin saying super knob review, and Sheeb saying being picky is just the audio hobby, or most hobbies in general. Yeah, definitely. Mahmood asking for the best 3 IMs under 120 bucks. Check out squig.link, click the rankings button in the header. You can filter on price. You can filter it to not 120, but I have it filtered for 150 bucks. And then just take a look. It's already pre-sorted for you for price range. I think it's going to be things like the File FH3, the Etymotic ER2 XR, and I forget what else. But Scott Pledger saying, I would like to see an amp review where the primary scoring was based on how satisfying it is to use. My clicky amp is a Manly amp I found in a garage sale 5 or 6 years ago. Interesting. Okay, I'll have to check that out. And would I be laughed off of the internet if I just posted an amp review and all I did was talked about the knob? Can I get away with that? Would a manufacturer be happy with me? Probably not. Would you be happy with me though? Maybe. We'll see. Johnny Wilkes saying, you're following up on the Eddy filter stuff, saying the Eddy filter game is real. You win some, but you lose most. Yeah, I've when I was first testing the filter kit that I got, and I only did really 3 filter swaps. I swapped the ER2 to the green filter, to the brown filter, or sorry, from the green to the brown, from the brown to the white, and from the white back to the green, back to the brown. You get it. 3 filter swaps. And I was very careful with all 3 of those filter swaps, and I got away without destroying really any of the filters except for one of the white filters, which I did destroy, and I felt bad about. And that's kind of like, it's just made me hesitant to want to play around with it more, which frankly I'd like to play around with it more. It comes with the risk of destruction, which is not that expensive either. I should maybe just get over it. But I have a problem with consumables. This actually plays through or comes out in my video game habits too. I'm playing a video game where you have consumables like, you know, a potion that refills your health or something like that. Like Castlevania Symphony of the Night was a game that had a lot of consumables in it, and I don't like using consumables. So I would end up completing that game and just have a ton of excess consumables, and I just would have made my life more difficult before that because I didn't like using consumables. It's weird. I just now connected that to video games, but I do think that it is probably still the same sort of psychological problem, psychological tendency. I don't know, however you want to describe it. It's probably the same thing for me. Scott, appreciate the confidence. We'll see. We'll see what we can do. And Mahmoud asking for the best device to play music under 150 bucks. Look, if my budget was very strictly capped at 150 bucks, I'd probably pick up a FiO M3 Pro. It's not my favorite digital audio player, but I don't know, probably makes the fewest sacrifices that bother me. But I'm not looking at what current prices are. Maybe some things that I would pick over it have actually dropped in price and would be attainable for under 150 bucks. Like under 150 bucks, I'd probably be looking used, if I'm perfectly honest. And I would try to get like a Sony A45 or something like that. But yeah, folks, I think that's going to do it for this review. Thank you all for tuning in, and for the questions, the conversation, always the best part of these videos. If you found this video helpful, please do hit the like button down below. It does help me out, helps grow this channel. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, but you're here now, you're probably subscribed. That would be weird if you're here like 60 minutes into this review and you didn't subscribe. But if you haven't, please do subscribe. Ding the YouTube bell, and then I'll catch you on the next super review. Have a good one.